in terms of like propositioning these people as you knock on doors, or talking on the phone.
Proposition is probably not the right
Going back, like, as you're building your message, is it, in your views, is it okay to come at them? Let me just give you the example. I just can't think of Brian Johnson. It's the first time I get calls.
Yeah.
And I have one guy that talked to me. I was really excited. And he was on his stuff. He had a lot of questions, some that I couldn't even answer, but he was just very, very willing to talk, but also he wanted to make sure he was very educated. And so I said, personally, I think that's great that that you're taking time to ask these questions. And I'd encourage you to do so for as you look at all the candidates so that you make the best choice. And then I was like, this lady, they're gonna be because they're to say Brian Johnson, you want to push that message. Like when you go to voters, is it okay to be honest with them and say
yes?
Yeah, I mean, but to the point where you say I want to empower you to. I mean, look at the whole playing field. Don't just consider me. I want you to.
Well, I think there's a way to square that circle. In other words, I think smart, intuitive people are going to just have an instinct when they're pushing too hard.
Sure.
If every question he asks has the answer, and this is why my candidate's the best, you're going to push that person in the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. And I think your instinct on this was exactly right. So I think saying, I'm going to provide you answers to your questions. But you're looking at this exactly the right way. You're learning as much as you can before making a decision. And I know you're going to come to the most informed decision, whoever that candidate is. My opinion is that it's my candidate. Mm-hmm. And if you have more questions that I can answer, I'm more than happy to talk to you about it. So you put the stamp on it, but maybe a little bit more lightly. Gotcha. And there's no absolute rule for that, but it's trusting your judgment. It's trusting your judgment. Because I think you all know that whether it's a candidate, or a movie, or a restaurant, if somebody pushes too hard, they're going to turn you off. And so making sure they remember your goal is important. But if you can do that with a lighter touch, then it's that much more important that you follow up. Say, look, I know you've been reading about all the candidates, and I give you a lot of credit for that, but I came back here with additional information, and here's why I think that my candidate makes the most sense. And even if you throw in the qualifier, that's okay, as long as you remind them why you're there. Because, technically speaking, you're there to educate them and to win their vote. And there's no reason you can't do both. But if you just educate, how heavy and how light a touch it is, I think it's a matter of human instinct. It sounds like in this situation you made the right call.
Okay.
So let's move on to the third area I wanted to cover today. And that's the distinction between positive and negative messaging. And we'll talk about this more over the course of the 2 weeks after, the 2 classes after Memorial Day. But once you've developed those mirror opposite advantages and disadvantages, that leads you to a fairly logical conclusion. I can either tell voters just good things about my candidate, I can just tell them bad things about the other candidate. Or, and I'll come back to this in a second, I can actually offer that information in the context of a comparison. Tell them about a mere opposite advantage on my candidate and a corresponding weakness on the opponent. But I want to back up for a minute before we go further into that. What does a positive message do? When I tell you something good about my candidate, either about his or her personal or professional political biography, I establish an emotional connection and a level of credibility. If I tell them about a policy position on which you think my candidate's answer is the right one, basically what I'm doing when I'm providing you positive information, favorable information about my candidate, is I'm building an emotional connection. I'm building an emotional connection between you, the voter, and my candidate. I'm making you think more highly of him or her, and this is not unique to politics. You might never actually meet Barack Obama or Mitt Romney, but if you learn enough about their biography and enough about their policy priorities, you're going to feel like you have something in common with them. We talked about this a week or 2 ago. This isn't unique to politics. How many people in here watch television in the morning between 7 and 9 a.m.? Not 2 hours nonstop, but how many people turn on the television during those 10 hours? One or two of you, okay. You're teachers, what am I thinking? Well, for non-teachers in the world, you may have heard about this. The networks have news programs. They showed on Morning American, CBS this morning. And different people choose different networks for different reasons. But it's not like many of them say, you know that Al Roker, he's such a superior meteorologist to the other people on the other two networks. That's not why they watch the Today Show. Why do they watch the Today Show? I feel like they got a little bit more of an emotional connection with him than they do with the people on the other two networks. They watch the way Matt and Ann or George and Robin interact with each other. They turn on Channel 5 or Channel 11 for the silliness, and they watch the back and forth. They feel a butterfly. They feel like they're part of a conversation, even if they're not really actually part of it. This works with television programming too. I know you're teachers, but do any of you have favorite television programs? Evening dramas? Anybody in here watch Mad Men? Anybody in here watch the last episode of House is starting in about half an hour? What's your show?
I like the Daily Show.
You like the Daily Show? Let me come back to Daily Show because it's a great example, but for a slightly different reason. Okay?
The Good Wife?
You like The Good Wife. Okay, now Brent, I hate to be the one to break this to you. You know there's really no character, Alicia, right? She doesn't exist. She's a fictional character who Julianne Margulies plays on television once a week, right?
I do understand that.
Okay. Yeah, you turn in every week, even though you know she doesn't exist, you turn in every week. Why? Because over the course of time, you've established an emotional connection with her and the other characters. Is she and her husband going to get back together? Is she going to end up with the lawyer? You know, is she going to keep her job? Is she going to get promoted? All these kind of things. You form an emotional connection with her. Favorite television character, newscasters, politicians. You don't know them, but you form an emotional connection with them. And once you form that emotional connection, you want to strengthen it. And positive information, from your opposite advantages, creates and strengthens that emotional connection. You might not have ever met Jerry Brown or Meg Whitman, but you established a better connection with one than the other. And that didn't necessarily sway your vote, but it expanded the window of opportunity. It allowed you to listen to them for a little bit more in somewhat more detail. Like I said a minute ago, you might not meet Obama or Romney between now and election day. But if you feel like you've got something in common with them, either biographically or from a policy standpoint, the window of opportunity gets larger for them to communicate a message. So what a positive message does is it creates or it strengthens an emotional connection. A negative message, on the other hand, when I tell you something unfavorable about my opponent, that weakens or destroys the emotional connection. And once that emotional connection is weakened or gone, then the voter's not going to listen to anything that my opponent has to say.
The emotional connection, can this be on, is this just in terms of the biography, or can it also be in terms of the issues?
Well, it can be in terms of issues.
Okay.
You like dogs, I like dogs. All right, we have an emotional connection on what we want to do about dogs. Eric, this is a great issue, so I mean, it's an excellent example of how policy forms an emotional connection. That's not to say college preparedness doesn't. I have a teenage child, you have a teenage child, we're both worried about whether they're going to be able to afford college, or whether they're going to be qualified to attend a UC or CSU school. Let's talk about college preparedness. That forms an emotional connection as much, or in a lot of cases even more, than who our favorite sports team is, or where we grew up, or any of the more personal biographical matters. So your questions?
Well, I mean, I guess I thought about, and I don't know if this is entirely relevant, and it's embarrassing to say now. I figured, I had a huge personal connection with Congressman Anthony Weiner when he
Destroyed it.
yeah, and I think about that when he sabotaged himself, and how, like, I mean, I pretty much took a step out of politics until shortly before I started coming to this class. I mean, like, I was just done with all of it. And I was pretty active politically before that, but it was just kind of like, you just can't trust these guys.
Well,
And I sometimes, I don't know, maybe that's me being immature, but
no, No, it's a great point. And let me spend a couple of minutes on it, and then we'll go back to the broader conversation. It's really, really easy to turn off on politics and to decide not to run or to decide not to support a candidate because somebody let you down. Well, people have probably let you down. I'm guessing people have let me down in areas outside of politics. I had teachers who let me down. That doesn't mean I stopped going to school. I've had bosses who let me down. It doesn't mean I stopped working. Tempting, is it? There's good and bad teachers. There's good and bad bosses. I may have had a difficult conversation with a police officer at one point. It didn't necessarily make me reject law enforcement as a concept. And I think for every bad actor out there, for every Edwards, for every Wiener, for every person on either side of the aisle who does not uphold their public office the way they ought to, there's a lot of others who do. And even if you disagree with them fiercely on the issues, there's no reason you can't recognize and respect them because they do make an appropriate manner. Good? You were let down by somebody you believed in? I'm guessing that everyone in this room has been too, either politically or otherwise. And it can be, and I don't say this pejoratively at all, that can be a phenomenally convenient excuse not to stay active. Think about it. I'm guessing all of you know somebody who had a really bad experience with a student or a principal or a parent and use that as a reason to get out of teaching. Well, there's a lot of other kids who really can benefit from that, and a lot of other parents, a lot of other principals who really do want to be part of it for you. So yeah, you can always find a reason not to do something. And the fact that you decided to come back around, I think, is to your credit. And if you really do believe truly deeply in someone, I had a student at Cal years ago. His first job after college, he moved to Iowa to work for the John Edwards for President campaign in 2004. He was stationed in an absurdly remote corner of Iowa. He was the only person in a 5-county area for the Edwards campaign. He lived and breathed and ate John Edwards for president. And when Edwards came up short, he couldn't wait for John Edwards to run again. Because unlike his senior people who knew the truth and didn't want to work for him again in 2008, my former student was so far down the totem pole he couldn't be exposed to it. He didn't know it. So he got ready to sign up again in 2008. And the news started breaking. And of course the campaign ended. And he decided he was done with politics. And I won't go into any more detail, but after a while of deciding he was done with politics like you, he found another candidate, this one here in California. And he decided that working with her, working for her, was important to him. And the positive benefits he got from helping to elect this woman to office more than overcame the disappointment he felt from being betrayed by his former candidate. I'm guessing if you decide to stay involved, you will find a man or a woman or a cause who makes you not forget Anthony Weiner, but makes you realize that he is an outlier, not an exemplar.
You said negative messaging weakens or destroys the emotional connection of your opponent, but have you found that it destroys your own emotional connection?
I'm so glad you raised that. You provided me the perfect segue to my next, to the next point I was going to make. Negative campaigning, negative messaging is a double-edged sword. Here's the benefit of negative messaging. People remember it. People remember it a lot more than they remember positive messaging. How many of you in the classroom at one point or another threatened or warned your students of consequences if they didn't do something? If you guys don't quiet down, then hell will rain on you, or whatever you decide that the consequence should be. No, there's two ways to approach this. You are such wonderful students, and I treasure every day I spend here in this classroom with all of you. Not you guys, but but you know what would make me even enjoy this time even more? If you would please, for just an hour or so, stop throwing erasers at each other. Would that be okay? That's one way to approach them, right? What's the other way to approach them? You warn them. You don't threaten them physically, but you warn them of adverse consequences. And every single one of us has had this experience with parents.